Welcome to The Bottom Line, where we unpack some of the main economic and business stories of the day. I'm your host, Alexandra Marhevich. Now, many in Central and Eastern Europe have long relied on production-heavy factory economies to fuel their growth. Meager GDP growth data from Czech Republic seems to suggest that the juice that has propelled the economy forward for the past 30 years is running out. The question is, what now? And how can Central Europe soldier go on? Now, to guide us through these complexities, I'm joined by Maro Holzer, Director from Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So now let's start with Czech Q3 figures. I wonder, because we do see that 1.4% of GDP growth year on year in the third quarter is better than 0.5% in the second quarter. But it's a small far cry from 4% that Czech economy managed a couple of years ago. So what is going on with Czech economy? Why won't it grow faster?
Well, actually, growth, as far as exists in the region, really comes from domestic sources. So private consumption is really helping out. The region's growth rates this year might be somewhere around 2 to 3%, which is not a lot. On the other hand, if you look at Germany and Austria, they are basically not growing at all. So given the international circumstances, given the situation in which the German car manufacturing industry is, the growth rates in the region aren't that bad.
Right, so having that in mind, and given the revised data, are we likely to see further momentum in the final quarter, or could headwinds pull growth back down?
The problem is, as far as I can see, that, for instance, the purchasing manager indices of November and December in manufacturing industry throughout Europe are heading south, and that might well be related to the election of Donald Trump as President of the United States and his announcements of increasing tariffs. For instance, against China, but also against the European Union. And given that this is something he talks about regularly, we can likely expect this to actually happen, and that globalization, which actually already started to stagnate around the outbreak of the global financial crisis, is indeed on the retreat. And that means that all export-oriented countries, such as the countries of Central, East, and Southeast Europe, will have some problems in the future. And also those countries who are particularly strongly related to the German car manufacturing industry, that is in a structural crisis, will have it more difficult than others that rely maybe more on business services and other industries.
So you mentioned German economy, you mentioned also now elections and President Donald Trump. Do you think that now perhaps Central Europe is still in the shadows of external factors that are influencing it?
This is the one side. This is the past growth model was based on a car manufacturing industry, lot of international, particularly German subsidiaries in the region. Well, this growth model probably comes to an end. We see also that one driver of domestic consumption and increases in domestic wages is actually the fact that the region, or large parts of the region, are losing workforce, and there is a demographic decline. That means that automation must go on. That means that also wages for workers are increasing. Unemployment rates are at a record low, not necessarily because the economy is doing great, but basically because there is either shrinking population or at least shrinking population in working age. So these are important domestic elements which add to the external issues that Europe faces at the moment.
Now, this brings me now to my next question, because in 2021, you and your colleagues prepared a report stating that many CE countries now, including the Czech Republic, but also Hungary, Poland, rely on production-heavy factory models. So why might this approach be reaching its limits, and what signs do we see of slowing convergence with Western Europe here?
Well, this is basically a model that needs a globalized world where you can specialize in manufacturing, for instance, in cars and export them all around the globe. Once some of these conditions aren't there anymore, the product itself is not anymore great. The Chinese have conquered, so to speak, a new car market in e-vehicles, and Europe is late on this. Countries will need to find also other sources of growth. We see already since quite a few years that business services are on the rise, that you have also some promising startups, unicorns in Central Eastern Europe, for instance, in the Baltics, but also in Croatia, for instance, and typically capital cities are full of programmers and software developers. These are new elements of a future, more digital economy. And I think,
so speaking of these elements, which one do you think is the most promising here?
Well, I think that the software development is an important issue. We see also that digital skills among the younger generation in the region are relatively high, higher partly than in Western Europe. This is something to be exploited. There, I think it needs that the governments work together with industry and universities, that there is more funding for STEM education, and generally that there is maybe also support in terms of demand for new digital services. This is something that obviously Estonia was doing very well, but also other countries in the region aren't doing that bad in this area and could do much better.
So would you say that we need more engineers then?
This is obvious, I think, for all countries in the world. This is not specific to this region. I think in addition to that, obviously, the issue of cheap energy, renewable energy, is something to be looked at. We need also the electricity networks that are able to connect basically the potentials for wind energy in the north, for instance, the Baltic Sea, with solar energy potentials in the Balkans, for instance. So these are elements together also with, I think, a social plan to provide a future for young families in Central East and Southeast Europe, with kindergartens, with better healthcare, with green spaces in cities and so on. Do everything to keep a highly educated population in those countries which have suffered for decades an outflow, particularly of those groups.
So now EU and CE countries often specialize in lower value segments of the production chain. So what practical steps, to your mind, can governments take to move towards higher margin sectors such as headquarters, research and digital services, for that matter?
This is exactly the way to go would be to cooperate with industry from the government side and with universities. The level of universities could be improved to a large extent. There are some quite good, also technical universities, but I think there must be more funds, more also research funded by government institutions to step up research and development overall, but also always in connection with the businesses. One can think about all kinds of incubators to be developed. There are certainly also some best practices globally. One can look at also how things were done in Singapore, in Ireland, and similar countries. I think it would be important for government officials to travel and see how other successful countries have done it.
Right, I feel like we do have an example close to home because Poland tried to move up the value chain on grand scale with petrochemical facility called Olefiny 3, an investment by Polish energy giant Orlen. Now, but the investment itself failed and had to be scaled back. So it feels like it doesn't have much financial sense because tens of billions need to be spent and profit was low and hundreds of millions. What do you make of it?
Well, I think that a lot of these things are also not necessarily something that you can do on the national level. There is also a big role for the European Union, and I'm very hopeful that the Polish presidency that just started in the Union will work closely together with the Commission that has big plans to improve overall European productivity. I want to mention the Draghi report, who clearly states that we need more cooperation, that we need joint funds for large-scale investment, particularly in those future areas of growth. And I would hope so that Central, Eastern and Southeast European governments would try to support Poland and the Commission in this endeavor, and also think about a joint indebtedness, which so far was a no-go, but I think will be necessary to spend hundreds of billions in high-end investment, which could also help the region very much so.
So CEE countries going hand in hand with Brussels to make it work. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And now that was Maro Holzer, economist from Vienna Institute for International Economic Studies. And that was his bottom line for today. And remember that in the world of business, the bottom line is the only line that counts. Alexandra Marhevich signing off. Goodbye.